I had my children on the floor. I was on my favourite blanket that my grandmother gave me on the floor like a cat.
And I realised in that moment the potential of what our bodies can really do as women.
Like I could feel his head, I could do my own internal, like, yeah, his head, I could feel it.
I was in tears, I was just in tears and overwhelmed with gratitude.
Hi and welcome to the Natural Birth Podcast, the podcast that is bringing embodied birth wisdom from women from all over the world sharing their natural birth stories. Don't forget to subscribe and download so that you can always have access to these empowering and positive natural birth stories. Hi, my name is Anna and I am the Natural Birth Podcast host. I'm a former midwife who left the system and I'm now the proud founder of Sacred Birth International, a woman-owned company with a mission to revolutionize the birth world and bring focus to the sacred and the natural intelligence of the birth process. We do this by providing world-class education, courses, programs, and coaching to equip women with the knowledge and the tools to have conscious pregnancies, empowering and positive birth experiences, and the most nourishing start possible for themselves and their babies postpartum. We also educate and mentor aspiring birth workers into sacred space holders and physiological birth advocates in the Sacred Birth Worker Mentorship, the Beyond a Doula training. If you'd like to work with me or take any of our courses, programs, or the mentorship, then head on over to sacredbirthinternational.com to find out more. Hi, and welcome back to the Natural Birth Podcast. Today, I'm going to share with you how you can best prepare for a home birth. Previously, I've talked about how to prepare for a natural birth in any birth setting, which is such a great episode. If you're planning a home birth, please go and listen to that one first and then come back to this one. I've also done an episode on how to prepare for a hospital birth. So today, we're going to dive on into home birth, my absolute favorite subject. I love attending home births. There is nothing more magical than being invited into a woman's home in her domain. It is such an honor, such a privilege. It's just so nice to be in her home where she has chosen the midwife she wants to have there. She's chosen her support people. And it's just this lovely, relaxed, familiar feeling, homey feeling, right? And it's usually, when you get to a birth as a birth worker, you come in usually at night and it's dark and there's fairy lights and there's candles and maybe soft music, and the woman is usually in her zone with her maybe a partner or close support person, and it is just, I can only compare it to like Christmas, when you were a kid. That's how I feel when I step into a home birth. Just those butterflies, and I know that I'm going to witness something magical and great, right? And of course, that happens in hospitals and birth centers too, but if you know, like, I know there's a lot of birth workers who listen to this podcast, and if you know, there's just this, how can I put this? It's this like energetic feeling. There's this, it's palpable, the difference walking into someone's home in a home birth compared to coming into even a birth center, in hospital, just that clinical setting. It really, really feel like in a home birth, it is the woman's, and the family's domain. It's not, doesn't belong to the midwives, nurses, doctors. It's not that foreign place. It is like coming home, right? So anyway, I'm a big home birth fan, as you can hear, and today I'm going to share my kind of ultimate home birth checklist with you and just walk through a little bit of what I recommend that you prepare for the home birth and think about before the home birth. But before we dive on in today, I have a few announcements. The first one is that I've started this Facebook community for this podcast called the Natural Birth Podcast Community, of course. And in there already, there's lots and lots of podcast guests who are joining every day. So I started with inviting the podcast guests to come on in. And now I'm opening it up for all of you fans of this podcast to come and join. My intention is for you all to hang out, to communicate, to, every week as a new episode is released, hopefully that podcast guest wants to be in the Facebook group or has Facebook. I mean, not everyone has Facebook, but if they do, I always invite them. And in there, we might share their birth videos or their birth photos. And, it's a place where you can come and engage and talk to the podcast guest and say, oh my God, your podcast was amazing and I learned this. Or maybe you want to ask questions from them. So I feel like it's long overdue, but I'm so happy it's finally here. So please go to the show notes and join the Facebook group. It's free. The only thing I ask of you is that you answer the questions so that we know you're a real person. And then we're going to let you through and you can hang on out with all these amazing women who listen to this podcast. And of course, the amazing guests that come on and share their amazing, natural, empowering birth stories. So that's the first thing I really wanted to share with you all. I'm so excited for you all to join. I'm loving the vibe in there already. And it's actually really amazing to see all these old guests from even like the first season, second season. This podcast has been, I think we're up to 5 years in May, because that's when I launched it. So I mean, that's a lot of seasons and a lot of women who have guested the podcast, and some of them, I haven't spoken to for quite some time, and this opportunity to, now inviting them to this Facebook group have given me the opportunity to catch up with them again and hear, oh my God, you have another baby, you have to come back on, or, oh, now you're starting to be a birth worker and all of these things. So, I mean, I just love that. And talking about, becoming a birth worker, so many of you guys listening to this podcast are also wanting to be a birth worker, which is amazing. And I think more than half of all my Sacred Birth Worker Mentorship mentees have come from listening to this podcast, being birth nerds, loving listening to birth stories, or maybe being a guest on a podcast, or maybe being a mama who have listened to the podcast to prepare for her natural empowering birth, and then going on having that and just being filled up with enthusiasm and passion for birth and birthing in sovereignty, birthing, in an empowered state. And really, whatever birth that is, I'm holding this space for natural empowering birth stories because I feel like there's just not enough of that kind of shown to the world. And but that does not mean that I believe that that is, the only way you can have an empowering positive birth experience. Absolutely not. It's definitely you can feel like a birth can be traumatic in any birth setting and in any kind of birth. It's so multi-layered. The one kind of number one reason one feels empowered is that, you feel like you chose every step of the way, or you were informed, you felt in control, whether you're having an emergency cesarean at the end of it. It's how you're treated along the way, the people you have around you. Why I always, always, always advocate for you hiring your own birth worker, whether that is your independent home birth midwife, whether that is a sacred birth worker, which I obviously think is superior to all other birth workers out there. I'm obviously biased. Or a doula, or whoever you feel, drawn to and really safe with, because whatever birth you have, having those people in your corner who's there to advocate for you and support you and hold space for you and inform you along the way, whatever happens, is so important. And as you know, I'm super passionate about sacred space holding in birth. Right, that is my passion in this world, to teach birth workers that, and to teach my sacred birth workers that. More than half of the people coming to do the Sacred Birth Worker Mentorship with me are already a birth worker, like a doula or a midwife, or we have a peds in there now. So it's a really comprehensive mentorship that really focuses on aspects that just, I would say, almost no other training out there do, at least not to the extent that we go to, which is really like really diving into what it is to be a woman in this world, and everything from our, body, our sexuality, our cyclic nature, our other rites of passages, feminine spirituality, how we are one with nature as cyclic women. We work on the throat chakra, on our relationship to authority, like really becoming the sovereign human being. We work on our own inner stuff so that we can be this clear channel as we step into the birth space. And I think this is really important if you hold space for people in any profession, but especially when you are a birth worker in the birth space. So, if you're a mama listening to this right now, you're about to prepare for a home birth. This applies to you because, who you invite to your birth space is going to affect your birth process. That's just a fact, right? So why I'm so passionate about teaching my mentees sacred space holding is because the way we show up for a woman in birth, like what we hold in our nervous system, our ability to really be grounded and present, our ability to clear our own monkey mind and work our own inner wounds or traumas or whatever. If we've birthed a baby and all these things, like working through these things, our birth imprints, our mother wound, or, we work on these things so that we can be clear channels for you, right? So when you pick a midwife or you pick a doula, or you're lucky enough that you live somewhere where there's a sacred birth worker, it's really important that you tune into her, feel into her. This is wherever you're birthing. But I mean, this is where a lot of women in the home birth setting might not always take this so seriously. Maybe there's publicly funded home birth programs in your area, and because it's free, which is amazing, you choose that, and I understand that. But if you choose that, I actually think you should get a woman, like a sacred birth worker or a doula that you employ. Because at the end of the day, if you pick the publicly funded midwives into your home birth, you're bringing that hospital system, kind of bringing that medical system into your home. Now, they might be amazing. I'm not saying that. And I've worked in those settings, so I'm not saying that. But you don't know who you're getting potentially. And their first allegiance is with their employer. And it has to be. And so that's why I really, really advocate for you to, whether you're having a home birth, birth center birth, hospital birth, you employ your own birth worker to be there for you. You are her employer, right? She's there solely for you. No, this is different if you're hiring a home birth midwife. Again, not always, because it depends what state, what country, how they are, So this is, though, a really big topic. Like, choosing the right people for your home birth will make or break it. And you've probably heard that on this podcast several times, as women potentially had a home birth and then had a midwife that maybe wasn't that good at holding space. Maybe actually was afraid of birth. Maybe actually wasn't feeling fully confident doing the VBAC with her, or, fill in the blank. And then you have amazing midwives that, where you don't need to employ someone else. So just be really discerning. And just because you're having a home birth doesn't mean that the providers coming to your home always are really good at upholding the physiology, the natural birth process, that they're good at actually holding space for you in all different stages of your labor process. They might have a very strict kind of, oh, only call me this time or whatever, all these things that maybe doesn't make you feel safe. So continuously throughout your pregnancy, if you're choosing to have a home birth and you're inviting home birth midwives or other support people, constantly check in with yourself if it's still right for you. It might change. And it's never too late to change your care provider. It's never too late to change your care provider. Even if you're like 39 weeks, if you're feeling something's off, I don't trust her anymore, she said something, she did something, it doesn't feel right, first talk to her, like have the uncomfortable conversations. Maybe it's a misunderstanding. I think, nowadays we're very quick at jumping to conclusions of things, and we're living in a very divisive world. Like, just have the uncomfortable, difficult conversations. If something doesn't feel okay, bring it up and then feel, how is she receiving that feedback? Is she getting defensive? Is she defending that? Is she just very rigid and, no, I'm not changing that, or that is how I mean it? Well, maybe then you need to change the person, right? But if she goes like, oh my God, no, I didn't mean that, and you can, find common ground, that honesty, that like daring to speak about these uncomfortable conversations, that creates vulnerability. It brings you closer together. It makes that trust even deeper, which is what you want with your home birth midwife. You want to feel like she's just your best friend, in a sense of like, you trust her deeply, trust her with your family, with your baby, with your birth process. You trust that you will be able to be naked in front of her, be raw and wild and sound, and be maybe the little girl, maybe go into, all these different things that come up in the labor process, that you feel comfortable that she can hold that. She won't judge you. She won't, try to make you stop sounding or whatever else. I mean, there's these people in the home birth setting too, right? That actually might not, should not be there. That's also a truth, right? So another thing that is really important with your home birth midwife is to really go through her routines. Like, what does a birth look like with her? Does she want to listen to the baby regularly, or is she open to just doing it every once in a while? What do you want? Is she, will she do what you want, or is she very stuck in what she wants? Is there, an open communication around that? One thing that a lot of women forget in any birth setting, but again, we're talking about the home birth setting here, and I've seen this a lot, is that a lot of women forget to ask about, what about the placenta? When the baby's born, like, will you just be chill with me just waiting for the placenta to naturally be born at any time after birth? Or do you have a timeline? Will you start fussing around after 5 minutes, 10 minutes? Will you do fundal massage? Will you pull on the cord? Will you want to give me injections even though I had a natural birth? Will you want to give me oxytocin? These are conversations that are really important for you to have with your home birth midwife before that happens, right? So that you don't end up like having your baby and not getting that beautiful golden hour because you have a midwife that's stressing about the birth of the placenta. Or what, maybe after half an hour, she has a policy that she has to call an ambulance and you have to go into the hospital because it's taking too long. If you've listened to this podcast for a while, you know that leave well alone. Like, if you're feeling fine and your baby's fine and you're not bleeding, there's no medical reason, then that placenta can take an hour to come out. Like, there's no stress. There's really no stress. But again, especially also if it's a publicly funded home birth midwife from maybe a birth center connected to a hospital, then they might have those rules. So you want to check that with her, all the things. One thing you can do is, download my ebook. It's a very comprehensive one about the most common all over the world hospital routines and procedures, that actually a lot of them might be transferred over to the home with a home birth midwife that's connected to the system like that, to the hospital or or the birth center that has that home birth program. So just because they have a home birth program, it's not equal to a home birth independent home birth midwife, because she's totally free to follow evidence. She's not bound to policies and guidelines that are unevidence based, like many home birth midwives in the publicly funded system are. Another thing to ask is, like, at 42 weeks, will she not be able to care for you anymore? That's something you want to have early as you may be interviewing that midwife. Like, will you just abandon me if I'm 42 weeks? Do I have to go into hospital and birth then? And check with her what all the things are for her to care for you, and have all these difficult conversations, and download that ebook with the routines and just check with her, from having that knowledge, right? Okay, so I have this also this free checklist, the ultimate home birth checklist. And I thought that I'd have that as a help today as I'm kind of going through what to prepare for a home birth. So we're going to talk about kind of the birth space, labor stations, nourishment, and what to prepare for a home birth. So, I mean, first of all, again, I'm so excited for you. And I really want to say, what research shows is that home birth for a healthy mama, a healthy woman just being pregnant, is equal to, not if even, safer for mom and bab than compared to hospital. And in many cases, like emotionally, spiritually, mentally, culturally, much safer, much, much safer. But if we just talk about like life and death, morbidity, mortality for mom and bab, equal, if not better. Yeah, especially now with this continuation of over medicalization in the hospital system. So I just want to start there, because there's a misconception with many people that, why would you take the chance? And the thing is, yes, there are some emergencies that can happen in any birth setting. The percentage of that happening at home is so significantly lower, like massively lower than in the hospital. Like, for example, if you look up postpartum hemorrhages, so bleeding after birth. Now, I'm not a person that holds statistics in my mind, but you can easily research that and see that the percentage in hospital is so much bigger than at home. And that is because actually the over medicalization, so the induction, the augmentation, the instrumental birth, the episiotomy, all these things increase the risk of bleeding. Yeah. So that's why it's much lower at home, because there's not much interference, if any, by the home birth midwife. Again, depends on the midwife. Some people will argue with me here and say, like, yes, the midwife can be an interference. And yes, absolutely. And I've been very, aware of that, working with different midwives and seeing how different midwives act in the home. And, that's why, again, like, it's a big emphasis in the Sacred Birth Worker Mentorship to really become aware, self-aware about what you bring into the birth space. Because yes, you have an effect on the woman, but there's no interventions like all the over-medicalization we see in the hospital system, and somewhere, somewhat also in the birth centers, again, depending on the country and state and so on. So again, it's really safe to birth at home as a healthy mom and bab. And again, it can be safe, or, it's on a scale that each woman has to take herself when it comes to, maybe you have some medical stuff going on. Maybe you are labeled high risk for some reason. Some things are like, truly, this is a high risk. Maybe you have a heart problem, right? And birth could be potentially triggering something with that. So that could, you need to be monitored in hospital. I mean, you can still choose to birth at home against medical advice and all these things. It might not be the wisest for you, but it's up to you. You're a sovereign woman at the end of the day. And then we have things like, having had one previous cesarean, which I really don't see at all being a high risk situation, truly, because actually you have the same risk or chance or whatever you want to say of having a uterine rupture as a first-time mom who's never birthed before. So at the end of the day, I don't think a VBAC is a high risk, but it's classified as that in the system. So, I mean, we have everything in between, right? So some women will have a higher, risk of things because they have medical conditions or whatever. But it's up to each woman to weigh the pros and cons and the risks and the benefits and make an informed decision about where she wants to birth and with whom. And maybe have shared care with a doctor and a midwife and plan for home birth and just have maybe a little bit more connection with the medical establishment in case her condition, whatever she has, gets worse or whatever. But still, it's the woman's decision. Anyways, yes, so home birth. Another thing I want to say about home birth is that also evidence show, because again, there's this misconception that it's just these irresponsible women birthing at home, right? Whereas actually research shows us that the ones choosing to home birth are usually highly educated women and actually women who have, yeah, like university degrees and are high income earners, and that kind of beats that preconceived idea that somehow it would only be people living in the woods, having no, being uneducated and stupid, that many people believe. And so I also just want to say that actually it's the opposite. It's usually highly educated women, well-informed women. And that's the thing, actually. If you do read the research, it's very obvious, actually. So anyways, I'm really excited that you are thinking about having a home birth, planning for a home birth. And now, of course, let's dive in to preparing for a home birth. And so one of the absolute, the most fun things to do is to prepare your home, right? To prepare your home for a home birth and how you should think about kind of preparing your space. So I usually say to my clients that, I mean, you're going to feel the nesting urge as you get closer to birth. And maybe it's a good idea, 37 weeks, to start preparing your home, to have all the things ready to go. Because, I mean, then you're term and you can really have a baby at any time, right? So prepare the space. Maybe if you want to have a birth pool, get that to your home at 36 weeks and set it up. Maybe even test it out once, fill it up, see how it feels, how long time it takes, so, especially so your partner potentially can help you set that up and fill the pool when you're ready to, birth or during the labor, right? And so maybe test that out. Have a nice evening where you fill that up and have a lovely time sitting together in the hot water and visualize the birth, talk about it. It could be like a birth plan meeting with you and your partner, a lovely evening where you just test everything out around 30, beginning of 37 weeks. Of course, things that makes a birth space cozy is fairy lights and soft lighting and maybe flowers and birth affirmations on the walls and your selection of birth music if you want that. And you can, maybe if you can, choose a room in your home, or maybe you think, oh no, I want to have it in the bedroom or in the living room. Like set it up, and usually you want to be in a corner that's very dark and cozy. I mean, a lot of women, there's a reason they birth in the bathroom, right? So they want to have a closed, confined space, usually very dark and cozy and private. So if you're setting up the birth space in your living room and it's like super high ceilings, big open windows, very, very big and airy, you're probably not going to feel safe birthing there. If you don't create a space in the corner, maybe have one of those walls that you can, divider walls that you can put up or hang fabrics and kind of make it into a closed-in area. But most women don't feel safe actually in that kind of open space. So then maybe it's better to prepare that in your living room, or sorry, in your bedroom, or maybe even your bathroom, depending on the size and stuff like that. So evidence shows that dark, undisturbed kind of spaces is where you feel the most safe and it's most conducive for birthing. So maybe start creating that around 37 weeks, doing a trial run with your partner. And another thing that I would also start with is kind of preparing labor stations. So some of the things that you can put out into your birthing space where you're going to be is maybe a mattress on the floor, or, before you go into labor, maybe it's just standing, towards the wall and you can just easily put it out. A yoga mat, a Pilates ball, maybe you have a chair that's really comfortable straddling, or maybe you even want to have a birth stool. Maybe you can buy them today, or maybe your midwife has one you can borrow. The toilet also works well for that. So, you can always, the toilet is a labor station in itself. Another tip is something to hang on to. A lot of women likes to do that around their partner, but also maybe a rope from the wall or from the door, from the ceiling. There's those, what's it called? Like labor birth slings, maybe they're called. Birth slings that you can hang up over a door or something to pull down on, right? So women throughout the ages have done that as they're birthing, like hanging off something and being heavy in their bottom and soft in their knees and kind of hanging. So those can be some labor stations that you can set up. And this will look different for each woman, right? What she's going to like. Some women like to be upstanding a lot and moving. Some like to be low on the floor in different parts of the labor process. You're going to want to do different things. And so just to have that ready, so say that you've set up in your living room, you found a little nook there, it's a small living room, or, it's very well kind of supported for that enclosed feeling. Just have those things next to the birth pool. A lot of home birth mamas like to birth in the pool. That's why that is just something I talk about, because so many of my clients have chosen that, and it is just so amazing for pain relief. It truly is, nature's epidural, if you want to say that. It is amazing for pain relief. And so is the shower. And the shower can be great, especially in early labor, to have that warmth, soothing of the water. I mean, salus per aqua, health through water is the thing, right? I find so much pleasure and so much relaxation from water, and so many women do in labor and birth as well. Some women love the shower, do not like the bath, and some like both, and some don't want anything to do with water. But to be honest, they're quite few. Most do. So, one labor station is definitely the shower. And the shower is so great, especially in early labor, as you still kind of want to work maybe with gravity potentially and not be in the pool. You've heard that a lot on this podcast, that many women have heard, and I've also said that to clients too, like, getting into the water, into the birth pool too soon can slow things down, slow labor down, because you're taking away gravity. And if the head and the baby's not well applied, like further along in the labor, then maybe that loss of gravity just will prolong the labor process. But that's up to you also. So, of course, if you want to jump in the pool, if you're feeling this strong urge that you want to get into the birth pool, and maybe it's still early, do it. Because I've also seen women do that. And because maybe they're just not able to relax in any other position or outside of the pool, that relaxation opens her. So again, like, there's no right and wrong. It's you as a birthing sovereign woman, you listen into your intuition, into your, inner knowing, your mama's wisdom. And if you have a strong urge to get into the birth pool and your midwife's there and saying, oh, you're only 3 centimeters, quote unquote, we know that that means nothing, truly. And she's, oh, you shouldn't. If you feel that, you do that. Okay? I just want to say that. Okay? So important. So important. Any birth setting, remember who is the expert. You. You are the expert. You know. There's some essential oils I want to mention as well that I really love using in the birth space. First of all, lavender. lavender is just has such a calming and relieving effect on tension. To have it in diffuser or to use it, like I might have some on my hands, you know. Sometimes, well, a lot of times women are quite sensitive to smells in labor. And so just having them on my hands and, having them, in front of her face or massaging her with it could be enough for her. But some do love it also in their space. So you just have to tune into the woman. A great combination if a woman is highly anxious, if you're feeling highly anxious at some point in your labor birth process, and that can be early on, things come up in labor for women. And so if you feel anxiety or fear coming on, the combination of lavender and peppermint is so powerful for anxiety. And another thing, actually, and this is not in my checklist, but is vetiver. Vetiver is also a essential oil that I love to use because it's just so deeply grounding for the nervous system, so deeply calming and grounding for the nervous system. So it's great for you as a birthing woman. It's great for a birth worker. It's just great to have these oils working with them in labor and birth for everyone because it just calms everyone down. And then here's a really good one, and that is clary sage. Clary sage is the essential oil for labor and birth. It can also, hint, be used as you come into terms of 37 weeks to encourage, if you and your baby are ready, to also go into labor, potentially using it on acupressure points that are good for kind of stimulating contractions. And I teach acupressure points to my mentees, and using them together with clary sage is just so good, so powerful. It's actually an oil that is just great for relieving also like balancing hormones for women outside of pregnancy, like just, your cyclic being at the time of your bleed, potentially like soothing that. It's just clary sage is a woman's oil, but it's also, potentially may strengthen and lengthen your contractions. All right. Next thing we're going to talk about is nourishment, food and drink in labor and birth. So this is definitely something that as a birthing woman, you might or might not kind of forget as you're in the midst of labor. Many women forget to drink, forget to eat, forget to nourish themselves. And in the beginning, you might be able to eat, and then you just also have a hard time actually eating. It's quite natural to not feel like eating, but, and I want you to really remember this, especially to all the critics out there about home birth. So the biggest reason, I mean, again, don't quote me on this, but I like my feeling would say like 90 to 95% of all transfers, at least that I've been involved in, has been because of maternal fatigue, maternal request. So home births usually don't transfer because there's an emergency. Usually the transfer is because the mom says, enough. I want some pain relief. I want to sleep. Might have gone for days. And birth can be a marathon. Well, many marathons, because a marathon is not as long as birth usually is. But it is. It can be a lot. It can be a long ordeal. And here is why this is like so important. Preparing for your home birth. Prepare for nourishment. Okay. Just have stuff ready, easy to go for you to grab or for your birth team to bring to you. Okay. So some foods that you can have when you're at in between before you're like getting to the point like not can't eat anything at all is soups and smoothies. Like first would be anything that you want to eat, right? And then you get to a point where maybe, oh, food is not very attractive, but maybe you need some nourishment because actually it's lunchtime and, you probably can because you're still in early labor or something. Soups and smoothies can be good at this point. And other things is snacks. And I always say, think picnic snacks. So like berries is a great thing. It's easy to snack on. It has good nutrients in it and sugar, which is great. We want that. Or like carrot, celery, and cucumber sticks with or without potentially a dip, hummus, or like guacamole or something like that. That can also really nourish you in labor. And it can be something that's actually nice to like bite down on, as well as pieces of cut up fruit like apples, oranges, or pears. And here's a really good tip that just no one said to me that this was not a good tip, and everyone raves about it. So listen up, write a note. Frozen grapes, frozen grapes, frozen grapes, frozen grapes. Okay, grapes are so high in sugar, which is great for energy, keeps you going. And frozen can be so nice, so refreshing, especially in the midst of really kind of active labor later on when you cannot eat. You might be feeling hot, especially like your face or your body feels hot. And then to have this cooling grape that gives you energy, you can suck on it. It's so refreshing. On that note, ice chips can also be a great thing to bite down on or suck on. It gives you fluids when you don't feel like drinking at all. And we're going to get into drinks in a second, but that's a really good thing too. Frozen grapes and ice chips to get some sugar and some fluids in you when you just don't feel like eating or drinking. And of course, nuts and crackers, but that it's not something that generally you feel like doing in active labor. Some women do. I mean, there's some women that'll eat a whole big fat steak at like 8 centimeters and then have a baby. There's no like one way fits all, but most women don't really feel like eating a big steak in active labor. Of course, drinking, you want to have filtered water. Maybe you want to have some cucumber or lemon there because it's just easier for the body to absorb that. Or hydrogen water, where you actually have a hydrogen bottle that helps your body to hydrate. Coconut water is just so good in labor and birth because it's kind of, it's natural energy drink and electrolyte drink, right? It's natural, beautiful energy. It's so good for you. Of course, juice and cordial also give you pure energy. Depends what you like and whatever you feel. I mean, coconut water is probably the superior choice over juice or cordial. But if you feel drawn to juice and cordial and that's what you like, then drink that, right? Don't do anything because I say it or because it's like the best. It's like, what do you feel? You want to have things that you like and want to eat and drink. Okay. So now we've gone through that. Now I'm going to go through a little bit more kind of prepping, which might be a little bit boring, but I think it's good to talk about. If you have a home birth midwife, she's most likely going to talk about this. But there's two things that I think are so important that people might not think about. The first is good phone reception. I mean, nowadays most people have good phone reception, but I worked in places that didn't. In Australia. And so I know that this is something that I would talk to my clients about. So to make sure you have good phone reception, both of course to be able to call your birth support team in and your midwife, but also, and you might go like, oh, don't be a downer, but also for transfer. I mean, let's talk about it. Again, having all the conversations. So with a home birth, you want to stay safe, right? And so home births are safe when also we have like a transfer plan in case of that very small percentage of either you wanting to go, of course, that's not an emergency. We don't need kind of, transfer plan for that. But the very, very, very little percentage of that actually, your baby or you might need extra attention in the hospital. And you want to make that quite simple. So what I would say there is have your car fueled up. Make sure that's fueled up. Let your partner be in charge of that. Have the car always full tank. And even though you're having home birth, this is in case of transfer, have the car capsule for your baby installed in the car. I can't tell you how many people don't do this. And it just adds extra stress, and just your partner has to leave if you're going to hospital and do that to get the baby and blah, blah, blah. Just have that installed and it's ready to go by 36, 37 weeks. Another good thing is to waterproof your mattress. Okay, in case you birth on the bed or just in postpartum, you want to just crawl into bed, which you do when you've had a beautiful home birth. You just want to get snuggled up in bed. Maybe your water's going to break in bed. You don't know, right? So just get a cheap plastic shower curtain. Or you can get those blueies, like poppy pads is also, I think, a name for it. They're like kind of some sort of plastic blue thing underneath, and then you have, I guess, paper or something that soaks up, like pad, very thin pad material or something. You can have that as well. Just, it's nice to have that prep by 37 weeks as well. Then you can sleep knowing that if your waters break, it's fine. If you birth there, it's fine. And it's already ready for your postpartum. And you want to have that there for the first weeks postpartum when you might bleed a bit more and breastfeed and all that, in the beginning might get a lot of bodily fluids everywhere, poops from babes and, all of that. It's just nice to have that underneath to protect your mattress. And then you want to prepare, well, it depends on who you are and what you want to do with the placenta, but you want to have a container ready for the placenta. Maybe you have a beautiful bowl, but it's not going to stay in the bowl. Maybe you want to have a lotus birth and then you prepare for that. That's a whole different topic. And if you're curious about that, I encourage you to research lotus birth, which essentially means that you don't cut the cord, you let the cord fall off from the navel of the baby, which means it could take anywhere from 2, 3 to 7 days, usually much shorter. Usually it's around 3 days that the cord falls off, but different for each baby. And then you need to have a little bag for that placenta, and there's a whole process on how to do lotus birth, so check that out if you're curious. But most women will maybe want to keep their placenta for later to bury it, and then they want to put the placenta maybe in an ice cream bucket to have it in the freezer for a while, or maybe they want to eat it, or they want to make capsules, right? Maybe someone's going to pick it up. So just have a container that you can put it in and put it in the fridge or freezer for someone to pick it up or save for later, or whatever it is that you want to do with that. Another thing that this goes into kind of prepping for the postpartum is to have frozen meals ready, and also like have maybe organize your friends and family to do a meal train so that you get served full, like really nourishing food in the days and the first kind of 24 hours after birth. It's so worth it. It's so worth it. And if you have frozen food ready, that's super nourishing and that's good for postpartum, especially, like, you want to think warm soups and stews and like high nutrient content, right? So it depends if you eat meat and stuff like that, but meat and, I mean, really like organ foods and like stuff that we in modern days think is yucky, but liver and things like this are really high in nutrients, right? And those things are great to eat postpartum. So it depends if you're vegan or vegetarian or eat meat, what kind of food you prepare, but you want to take some time in pregnancy to really suss out what is good in postpartum and how can I nourish myself. Because, people say, oh, you eat for two in pregnancy. Really? It's more so in the postpartum because you're breastfeeding, and that takes so much energy from you. You're going to be much more hungry than you think you're going to be. And so having all those things prepped in pregnancy is really important. Maternity pads, of course, to have straight after birth. And, maybe even if your waters break, I mean, it's good to have that to be able to change pads and keep fresh and avoid infection, right? If your waters break and you choose to, wait for spontaneous labor. And maybe if you have other kids, you want to organize other people to potentially take them as you go into labor or be there for them to support them. It's totally up to you if you want to have your kids present at birth. It can be beautiful. And also it can be really important. Well, it is really important for someone else to be there they're dedicated to take care of your baby, of your other kids, right? So if those kids don't want to be there, they can go out to play or go into another room or go away. Or if it's a really long process, you know, they can do excursions and stuff like that to entertain and take care of the kids. And then, of course, food, drinks, and toys to keep them occupied, like prep for that, of course. Now, let's talk about if you want to have a water birth. Again, I would say 90%, maybe more, of women that I've supported at home have a birth pool. Not everyone chooses to actually birth in it. Again, because you don't know, especially the first time around, you don't know if you're going to be the person that's going to love it or maybe get too hot or feel whatever you feel and just go like, nah, want to be on land, you know, want to birth on land. You never know. But most women I work with choose to at least hire a birth pool. So, of course, what you want to prepare is the pool. We already talked about it. You want to kind of test it out beforehand, make sure everything's working, have new clean hose and tap attachments, test them out, fill up, you know, with clean water, see how long time it takes to empty it, learn how to do that. Because, of course, when you haven't done it before, it's good to have a test run. Maybe you want to have a noodle. Some women like that because you can hang over it or, you know, use it in the pool. Um, you want to have like a clean bucket. You want to have a sieve, like a pooper scooper. Again, some of these things maybe the midwife will bring, so this is something you have to talk to her about. But a pooper scooper is a sieve that she can, most likely you'll have maybe a little bit of poo coming out. That's just what happens when you birth the baby. Just empties everything out. And then if you're in the pool, the midwife just easily can like, you know, scoop that up and put it in the bucket or whatever, wherever she's putting it. Torch and spare batteries and a big hand mirror can be really good, both for the midwife and maybe she brings it. And if she doesn't, that you have it. And especially like the mirror, because if you birth in the pool, maybe you want to be birth anywhere. Maybe you want to see. It can be really empowering to see the head as it's like coming out, like opening little by little, bigger and bigger, 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 and just see the progress. Of course, feeling with your hand as well, inside and as the baby's head comes out, can be really empowering and really connecting and just make you really understand and make you breathe, you know, slower and ease the baby out and all of that. And the same with the mirror. It's a really cool thing, especially in the pool can be good to have that in the bottom there so you can see. And just have a few old towels, like maybe two for the floor and, you know, a few that you can have around you when you get out because you want to just keep warm and snug, especially after birth, because we can easily kind of go into that, you know, the adrenaline is leaving our bodies and we can be shaking and maybe feeling a bit cold. So it can be good to have a few old towels ready for you. The same for the baby. You know, I usually say like maybe 4 baby blankets and a couple of soft towels for the baby just in case we use several, you know. Maybe there's blood and there's the urine or whatever, you know, just to have a few there. And another good thing is to have a heater or a hot water bottle that you can have the baby's baby blanket around so that when the baby's born, it gets this warm blanket around it instead of a cold. Can be a good tip. And of course, have, you know, cloth nappies or normal nappies, or maybe you're going to do elimination communication, but having that also there ready for afterbirth for baby. Like, of course, this checklist is not exhaustive. It's just a few tips, but there's just there's just nothing more beautiful than a home birth. I truly, I definitely prefer assisting births in the home, being in the woman's domain. It's such a privilege, such an honor. I can't even tell you just the magic I feel just thinking about it. My whole body, I long for it. One of the things I love the most about it is obviously that I very rarely need to advocate for the woman, that all her wishes are just so given, you know, that everyone's just respecting her in her space. There's no arguing, there's no dealing, there's no compromising, there's no taking doctors and midwives and nurses outside to discuss things. There's no protection of her space in a sense of like against other people generally. I mean, every once in a while there's a midwife that may or may not be out of line, but generally home birth, and because the woman has just chosen so carefully the people who come into her space, you can just be in this magic with the woman. You can just really be there for the woman. Whereas when you're in the hospital as a birth worker, there's so much protection having to happen. Like I have to have my focus on her, but also I have to focus on the door, the midwife, the people in the space, um, whether or not, there's going to be some sort of argument about what she's wanting and their policies and guidelines. There's just nothing of that in the home. So as a birth worker, like I can just step in and just fully be there for her on all levels, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, physically, supporting her, just tuning into her, not having to worry about anything else. And so it's more pleasurable for me in the work I do to not have to be the birth advocate, even though I can be her. And, I train my sacred birth workers to be her. Because again, a home birth can sometimes transfer most of the time because of the maternal request. And then, again, the importance of having someone that you employed walking into that institution with you, whether it's your choice or not to go, I think is so important. So please, please give yourself the gift. We only birth once, twice, a few times in our lives. It's huge, especially the first time around. The first rite of passage is the biggest. To be supported, protected, feeling safe. It's paramount, and it's worth. It's that if anything in life is worth paying for, it's that. It is worth it. It's worth to invest in your birth and in yourself and in how your baby comes into this world. And having that sacred birth worker with you, it's just invaluable, truly. It really is. Well, that was my little spiel around, home birth and home birth preparation. Of course, there's more to say. And if you ever want to dive deeper into preparing for your home birth, you can always book in a one-on-one call with me and we can dive deeper, specifically for you. You can download this home birth checklist in the show notes. I really recommend you do so you have it there and can follow along. I also have a birth bag checklist for the hospital that you can download that has some other yummy stuff in there that you can also use for your home birth. I have a link to a playlist, for example, with some birth music and other things in that checklist. So you find all of that in my free resources. Now, if you've listened to this and gone like, oh my God, I also want to attend births, home births as a birth witness and support person, then I really encourage you to check out the Sacred Birth Worker Mentorship. I am interviewing right now for the April start, and there's already women who've joined and women who are coming on board this week. And I'm just so excited for yet another cohort to begin this journey. There's already 30 plus mentees out in the world, all over the globe, which is fantastic, doing amazing work in the birth world. And, we can never be enough. It's time for the new Earth Birth Rebellion to happen. Birth workers that don't toe the medicalized line. And, as I said, there's half of the cohort are previous or mamas, previous birth, podcast guests. There's maidens that are just birth nerds, right? And who watch birth videos and cry and listen to this podcast and just love birth stories. Like this mentorship is for you. There's some who've done this mentorship that have done it for themselves because they want to prepare to become pregnant themselves and they want this depth of education. I mean, it's great for that. It's great to do. Some do it during their pregnancy right now in this cohort that's just finishing up this month, end of February. Is it 2 or 3 who are pregnant who's doing this in their pregnancy, I think. One has already birthed. And so it can be, something you do because you really want to learn everything you can learn about physiological birth and prepare yourself and do the inner work for yourself and your baby. And of course, half of them are already birth workers. A lot of them are doulas that recognize that their doula training was just not enough. And that is it. That is why I created this mentorship, is because a lot of doula trainings are just a drop in the ocean of what we learn in this mentorship. It really is so comprehensive. It's more like a midwifery training, but you will not become a midwife. You will not become a medicalized midwife. You will not become someone who knows about the medical kind of emergency skills and stuff like that. But you'll know so much more than even some midwives out there, many midwives out there, actually. It's a really comprehensive training. So if this tickles your fancy, come to, learn at sacredbirthinternational.com. Listen to all the previous mentees. There's lots of testimonials in there, written and video ones that you can listen to and tune into. Have a read, have a feel, and then apply and go on a clarity call with me and let's have a chat. I'd love to meet you. I'd love to talk to you. I'd love to learn who you are and if this could be the right training for you, the right program. One of the things that most of the mentees, I think everyone has said, is what surprised them was the depth we went to and the depth of sisterhood, the community that we create, which is also something I really love. And a bonus, having done this Sacred Birth Worker Mentorship, is that you're always welcome each year to come to the mentorship gathering in Sweden, where I live, at the Midwich Cottage, and hang out with all the other mentees from around the world. Last summer was amazing, and we're having another gathering now coming up in August this year. And also during the year, I obviously hold some gatherings around the world. Now in February, I'm going to Bali, and some of my beautiful mentees are gathering there with me. We're going to visit Bumi Sehat, the birth center that's quite famous in Bali, and we're going to do some beautiful ceremonies and rituals and gather and share and eat food and laugh and dance and do yoga and just hang out, but also practice some birth skills. I'm going to show them some things. And I plan on doing that all over the world for years to come. So that's a perk of being a Sacred Birth Worker mentee, is that you get to be invited all over the world to come and hang out with these amazing birth workers and learn from each other and share. And it's amazing. I love it. I love the community that has been formed, that is growing. I can't wait to invite you and more people to join us this April. And it's fantastic. Thank you for listening to this episode. I hope that you've enjoyed it. I hope you got some new ideas. Remember frozen grapes. And I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for listening. If you love this podcast, then please consider sharing it, leave a review, or make a contribution on our Patreon page. And if you want to connect on social media, then find the podcast on Instagram as The Natural Birth Podcast. Thank you for listening.